It was supposed to be an ordinary flight. One teenager, dressed neatly in sneakers too clean to be ignored in confidence, just enough to sit in first class, boarded with a smile that held no suspicion. But at 35,000 feet, miles above accountability, the simple act of sitting in the right seat triggered a chain of events no one on that plane would forget. The smiles faded, the whispers started, and within minutes, a black teen who had done nothing wrong found himself at the center of a confrontation that spiraled far beyond a single row of seats. What began as a subtle cold shoulder soon escalated into a slap, a public shaming, a fabricated accusation, and a nationwide firestorm that would shake the airline industry to its core. What no one realized, not the flight crew, not the applauding passengers, not even the captain, was who he really was. And when the truth surfaced, it didn't just clear his name. It exposed a system built to look the other way. If you're ready for a story that starts with silence and ends with a reckoning, this is it. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful storytelling, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's talk about injustice and the moment it gets caught in the spotlight. Jamal Harris clutched his boarding pass as he stepped into the cabin, sneakers whispering against the plush carpet of the plane's first-class section. He tried not to smile too wide, though every fiber in his body buzzed with nervous excitement. Row 1, Seat 1A, First Class. This was the gift, a reward for staying out of trouble, for getting accepted into college early, for surviving 17 years with his head down. His godmother, Alana, had called it a confidence trip. A way to feel the power and comfort the world always told boys like him they didn't deserve. He was to sit in first class, drink ginger ale in a glass, and look out the window over clouds like a king. That was the plan, until he met Madison Pierce. The moment he stepped into the cabin, her eyes narrowed, her smile thinned. She had greeted the tall white man before him with a laugh and light touch on the arm, then the elderly couple behind him with syrupy warmth. But Jamal got none of that. Instead, her eyes went straight to the ticket in his hand like a scanner trying to find the mistake. "Boarding pass," she said. Not a welcome, not a smile, just a demand. He handed it over silently. Her gaze flicked across the printed text, then up to his face. She blinked slowly, like she was recalibrating something. "First class?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Jamal replied, voice steady. "Row 1, Seat A." She nodded, slowly, suspiciously. "All right." Her tone said she didn't believe him. She didn't stop him, but her eyes followed him down the short aisle like a sniper watching for a threat. Jamal slid into his seat, trying to breathe. The leather was cool and smooth beneath him. He placed his backpack under the seat in front of him, hands trembling slightly, then adjusted the seatbelt. He'd made it, sort of, until her voice snapped again, louder this time. "Excuse me, young man." He looked up to find Madison standing directly above him, arms crossed. "I'm going to need to see that boarding pass again." Jamal blinked. "I already..." Again, she interrupted. Slowly, carefully, he retrieved the slip from his pocket and handed it to her. She held it like it might be counterfeit, studying it with exaggerated scrutiny. A moment passed. Then she looked at him like a school principal about to deliver punishment. "I'll need to double-check this against our manifest. There have been some issues today." "Issues?" he echoed. "Yes," she said, tone-clipped. "With upgrades and misbookings." She walked briskly toward the galley without another word. Jamal felt a heat rising in his cheeks. His palms sweated. He could feel the stares. Not all of them, but enough. A man 2 rows back leaned into the aisle for a better look. A woman across from him glanced up, then whispered something to the man beside her. Jamal sat perfectly still, back straight, heart racing. Madison returned with a printout and another attendant, shorter, brunette, looking uneasy. "Sir," Madison said, voice falsely polite, "our manifest doesn't have your name listed in row 1. Are you absolutely sure this is your seat?" Jamal nodded. "I checked in. They scanned it. It's Seat 1A. "We've had fraudulent scans before," she said. "Sometimes people switch passes at the gate." Her words hit like cold water. "That's not what happened," he said quietly. "My godmother bought this ticket. She's an attorney. Madison raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. Please step into the galley until we sort this out. Jamal hesitated. I didn't do anything wrong. Her voice lowered. Either you cooperate or I call the captain. And TSA will be waiting when we land. The other passengers heard that. Several turned their heads. That was all it took. Jamal stood, feeling like a criminal. As he stepped toward the galley, the man from row 3 smirked and said under his breath, "Guess they're cracking down." A few snickers followed. Jamal bit the inside of his cheek until he tasted blood. In the galley, Madison's voice dropped an octave, sharp and rehearsed. "Listen, I don't make the rules. But your name's not showing. I'm trying to keep this off the record, but if you push it, I will report it." "Why would you assume I don't belong here?" Jamal asked, voice low. "Because I'm black." "Watch your tone," she snapped. "I don't care what color you are. I care about seating integrity." "You mean keeping people like me in the back?" he muttered. Madison leaned in close, eyes narrow. "You want to make a scene? Go ahead. Let's see how far your story gets when they cuff you for being disruptive." Jamal stared at her, speechless. "You can return to your seat," she said. "For now." He walked back to row 1, barely seeing the aisle. It felt longer this time. The other passengers didn't meet his gaze. Some did. Their faces said it all. Suspicion, disgust, amusement. He sat again. This time, he didn't touch the seatbelt. He didn't belong anymore. Not because he believed it, but because she had made sure everyone else believed it. Madison returned 15 minutes later, face tight. "There's still a discrepancy," she announced. "So we'll be relocating you to coach." The brunette attendant looked horrified. "Wait," she started, but Madison silenced her with a glance. "Come with me," Madison said. "You'll be more comfortable in the back." Jamal didn't move. "I have a valid ticket," he said. "This seat was paid for." Don't make this harder than it is," she snapped. "You're being difficult." "I'm being calm," Jamal said. "I haven't done anything." She tapped her watch. "Now." The other passengers watched the scene unfold like live entertainment. The man in 1C shook his head. "It's not worth the drama, kid." Jamal stood. Again. This time with every muscle in his body clenched tight. As he walked the long walk to the back of the plane, people looked. To the man's left, the coughing continued, rhythmic and wet, punctuated by a throat clear every 20 seconds. Jamal tried to shrink into himself, tried to disappear, but space didn't allow for vanishing. The memory of being marched from first class still throbbed in his chest. He could feel the imprint of every eye that had followed him down the aisle, the weight of every silent mouth that had chosen not to speak. His ticket had been real. His right to that seat had been real. But his presence, to them, had been too much, too suspicious, too unearned. His phone buzzed once. A message from his godmother. "Flight good? Let me know when you land. Proud of you, kid." He didn't reply. He couldn't. A shadow moved up the aisle. Jamal looked up to find Madison Pierce making her way toward him again, clipboard in hand, lips tight in that familiar, disapproving line. She leaned in close, too close, and spoke just above a whisper. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step into the galley with me." His brows drew together. "What for?" "Routine inspection," she said. "Random security sweep. It's FAA mandated. Every now and then, we check carry-ons in the cabin for irregularities." He blinked. "Now." "Yes, now," she said. "Please." He stared at her, searching her face for a sign of jest, of logic, of something human. But there was nothing but tight protocol and false concern. The woman next to him raised an eyebrow, while the man gave a soft chuckle and shook his head. "Of course," Jamal muttered and unbuckled his seatbelt. He followed Madison past 28 rows of narrowed eyes and barely concealed curiosity. A toddler pointed at him as he passed. "What did he do, Mommy?" the child asked. The mother shushed her and avoided Jamal's gaze. In the galley, Madison set her clipboard aside and gestured to his bag, now retrieved from under his seat. "Open it, please." Jamal hesitated. "You think I'm hiding something?" "It's procedure," she said, voice calm now, like she was doing him a favor. "Standard protocol." "Since when?" he asked. Since security guidelines were updated, she snapped. Do you want to continue this flight without further issue or not? He unzipped the bag slowly, revealing a tangle of chargers, a laptop, 2 books, and a change of clothes. Madison peered inside, then used a gloved hand to shift the contents. What's this? She asked, pulling out a tightly rolled shirt. A shirt, he said dryly. She didn't smile. And this? A toothbrush. And this cable? Phone charger. I see. She rifled through the rest of it with clinical efficiency, then nodded. All right, you can return to your seat. He zipped it back up and hoisted it over his shoulder. You're not going to apologize? There's nothing to apologize for, she said. You were selected randomly. That's the policy. I've flown before, he said. No one's ever searched my bag mid-air. Well, times change, she said with a dismissive shrug. People lie. Documents can be forged. The implication landed like a slap. Jamal stared at her. You think I forged my boarding pass? I didn't say that, she replied. I'm just doing my job. Funny, he said. Your job seems to focus only on me. She didn't answer. She turned and walked away. As Jamal made his way back to his seat, he felt it again. Those eyes. Curious. Amused. Some averted their gaze as he passed, as if looking would make them complicit. Others stared openly, like spectators at a courtroom drama. One man nudged his companion and whispered something, which made her smile tightly. Another woman crossed her arms and leaned back as Jamal passed, as though protecting her purse. When he slid back into 32B, the woman to his left muttered, "That was quick." "Excuse me?" Jamal asked. "They only ever do those bag checks when they're looking for something," she said. "Guess you passed." He turned away, rage curling hot in his gut, mouth dry. He'd done nothing. He'd said nothing. And yet the punishment kept evolving. Quiet, unspoken, institutional. He had walked on the plane like any other passenger. Now he sat with a target on his back. The man beside him chuckled again and offered a comment without turning his head. "You're drawing a lot of attention for someone who just wants to fly." Jamal clenched his jaw. "Guess I should have walked." "Might have saved everyone some time," the man added. Jamal didn't reply. He stared at the tray table in front of him, the cheap plastic doll under the yellowed lights. He thought of his godmother, of how she would react to this if she knew, of how she might storm down the aisle in heels and shut all this down in 2 words. But she wasn't here. No one was. Not for him. He was alone at 35,000 feet, surrounded by strangers who had already judged him guilty. Of what, he didn't know. Maybe of flying too close to the sun, of forgetting his place. The seatbelt light came on again as the flight prepared for descent. A flight attendant, Tori, the brunette, walked by and gave Jamal a soft look. Pity, maybe even shame. He wanted none of it. He looked away. Madison appeared again near the front, passing down the aisle, not even glancing in his direction. Her job was done. He tried to center himself, counting backward from 10 as his godmother had taught him. But the cold knot in his stomach refused to loosen. The humiliation wasn't done with him yet. It wrapped tighter with every passing second. Every whisper in the aisle, every side-eye glance from the passengers who decided what kind of person he was before he even spoke. The plane hummed with mechanical calm, but inside Jamal's mind, static buzzed louder with each injustice stacked against him. First class had been a brief, fading dream. He should have known better than to believe the seat alone could protect him. A flight attendant approached, Tori again, her face tense with quiet conflict. She hesitated near his row, biting her lip before leaning in and whispering, "They're asking for your boarding pass again." Jamal turned his head slowly. "Why?" he asked, his voice low and exhausted. Tori shifted her weight, eyes flicking down the aisle toward the front of the plane. "Madison says she needs to verify something." Again. "She already took it," Jamal said. "Twice." "I know," Tori replied, then added, "Please, just bring it up. Maybe it'll help settle everything." Jamal stared at her for a long second. She looked like she meant it, but her tone had that defeated undercurrent, like someone trying to keep a wildfire from spreading by cupping water in their hands. Still, he reached into his pocket and retrieved the boarding pass. Torai gave a nervous smile, gestured for him to follow, and led him toward the galley. Again, the same walk, the same stairs, like a suspect being taken in for further questioning. He stepped into the narrow galley, where Madison stood waiting with her clipboard tucked tight against her chest like a shield. "Mr. Harris," she began, her tone sharper now, "we've encountered another discrepancy regarding your travel documentation." Jamal didn't flinch. "What discrepancy?" "Your boarding pass," she said, holding out her hand. "Please." Jamal held it up but didn't release it immediately. "Why do you need it again?" "Because," she said tightly, "it may have been altered." "Altered," he echoed. "I got it from the gate. It's scanned. Twice." "Just hand it over," she snapped. "We'll resolve this faster." Jamal looked her dead in the eyes, then began to extend the pass forward. As she reached to grab it, he instinctively held one edge to prevent it from crumpling. In that instant, her face contorted into something sharp and angry. "Let go of it now," she barked. "It's mine," he said, trying to stay calm. "I have the right to." Her hand whipped forward. A loud, unmistakable smack echoed through the galley. She had slapped his hand, sending the boarding pass fluttering to the floor. Jamal pulled his hand back, stunned. His skin stung, his pride even more so. Madison bent down quickly and scooped up the pass, holding it aloft like a prize. "Evidence of fraud," she muttered under her breath. "What did you just say?" Jamal asked, voice shaking. "I said," she replied louder now, "this boarding pass has irregularities. The ink density's off. That's usually a sign of counterfeit printing." "You're joking," Jamal said, but the horror building in his chest told him she wasn't. "Why would I forge a boarding pass?" "Some passengers find ways to game the system," she said, her voice smooth and condescending. "Try to get a taste of luxury for free. It's not unheard of." "I didn't game anything," Jamal said. "This was booked for me by who?" she cut in. "You've already told us that story. An attorney godmother. Very convenient." "It's not a story," he said. "I can call her." "I can, sir," she said suddenly louder. "We need you to stay calm." The words rang out like an alarm, catching the attention of nearby passengers. Someone stood slightly to get a better view. Torai appeared in the galley entrance, her eyes wide. Madison turned slightly, angling her body so she was still between Jamal and the rest of the cabin. Jamal looked between them, realizing with growing dread what this looked like. Him standing, her cornered. He backed up, hands slightly raised. "I'm not doing anything," he said, voice tight. "I'm just trying to understand why you've been non-compliant all flight," Madison interrupted. "You've refused to cooperate, challenged the crew, and now you've resisted a document handover." "I didn't resist," he said. "You hit me." "You resisted," she insisted. "And this behavior," she added, voice rising to carry into the cabin, "is completely unacceptable, especially in today's climate." Jamal's mouth went dry. He could feel the moment slipping beyond his control. "You're twisting this," he said. "You're making it sound like I'm dangerous." "Aren't you?" she asked, too softly for others to hear. Her smile was tight, measured, practiced. That was when he noticed Tori's hand, half raised, holding something discreet. A phone. Recording. Her eyes flicked between them, then back to her phone, a silent witness, powerless but awake. Madison turned, not seeing the phone, and stepped into the aisle. "Please return to your seat, sir," she said, as if he were a child who'd acted out. "We'll be reporting this upon landing." Jamal stood frozen for a moment, his legs resisting the urge to collapse. He looked at Tori, whose face showed something close to apology, but no courage. She didn't speak, didn't stop it, just let the moment pass, preserved in pixels but unchallenged. He returned to his seat in silence, the journey down the aisle feeling twice as long now. His hand still stung. The sting mattered less than the narrative she had just begun crafting. The passengers barely looked at him anymore. They had seen enough. They had heard uncooperative, resisted, discrepancy, and they had drawn their conclusions. In their minds, the story was already written. He had snuck into first class. He had caused problems. He had been checked and challenged. And now he had been put in his place. He had been stripped of his seat, his ticket called into question, searched without cause, slapped in the galley, accused of fraud, and then marched back through a cabin of smirking mouths and judgmental eyes. And now he sat again, seatbelt pressing against his lap, hands folded so tightly they turned pale, doing everything in his power not to explode, not to cry, not to speak, not to give them anything they could spin into resistance. But the story was no longer his. Madison had ensured that. She had framed him not just as a disruption, but as a threat, an unpredictable, ungrateful, possibly dangerous passenger. And now the narrative was moving beyond the galley. It was about to reach the cockpit. As Jamal stared ahead, willing himself not to look back toward the first-class curtain that had become a symbol of his erasure, Madison moved with purpose toward the front of the plane. She leaned into the cockpit, just enough for her words to stay private. The door didn't close behind her, just opened slightly, enough for a whisper to pass through and trigger protocol. "Captain," she said in a tone rehearsed to sound urgent but not alarmist, "we may have a security risk in row 32. A pause. "No, he hasn't done anything violent yet, but he's been uncooperative, aggressive. There's a pattern emerging, and I believe it's in our best interest to get ahead of it." Another pause. "Yes, I think an early landing would be the safest route." The captain's voice was low, clipped. "FA8 clearance?" "I can initiate the call," she said. "Just be ready to divert if approved." The door clicked softly shut. Madison turned back, composed, collected, and began walking down the aisle again. She stopped midway and leaned over to Tori. "Inform the marshal in 14C," she said. "Let him know we may need to relocate a disruptive passenger for the remainder of the flight." Tori froze. "You're escalating this?" "I'm protecting the crew," Madison said flatly. "And the passengers. You saw the way he acted. You saw him resist." "He didn't resist," Tori said, her voice barely a whisper. He refused a direct request, raised his voice, was physically defiant. He barely spoke. "It's not your call," Madison snapped, then softened. "Look, just let the marshal know. We'll do it clean. Quiet. No drama." Tori stood still for a second longer before nodding slowly and walking away. Madison continued down the aisle, past the rows of reclining passengers, past the passengers who now looked at her as an authority, not just on service, but on judgment. She reached Jamal's row and motioned to him. "Mr. Harris, I need you to come with me again." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Why?" "There's been a directive," she said. "For the safety of the flight, you'll be relocated." "Relocated where?" he asked. "To the jump seat," she said. "It's near the rear galley. Crew area only. You won't be disturbed there." "I'm not disturbing anyone now," he said. "Orders are orders," she said. "Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be." He stood slowly. His knees cracked slightly, a protest from the awkward position he'd been in for too long. He grabbed his backpack without looking at her, walked past her without speaking, and followed the narrow path to the rear of the plane. The murmur behind him was unmistakable. Passengers whispering, some nodding in approval, others casting brief, disgusted glances, their expressions clear. It's about time. One woman even clapped quietly as he passed. A man in a blazer gave a thumbs up to Madison as she followed behind. "Good call," he muttered to her. "Can't be too careful." Madison gave a tight smile. "Just doing my job." At the rear galley, Jamal was instructed to sit in the fold-down jump seat across from the lavatory. The seat was hard, narrow, and directly under a flickering overhead light that made it feel more like an interrogation chamber than part of a luxury airline. He was strapped in not with a standard belt, but with a multi-point harness designed for turbulence. Tori returned, standing across from him with a paper cup of water. She held it out. He didn't take it. She placed it on the galley counter. "This wasn't my idea," she said softly. "I know," he said, eyes not moving from the bulkhead wall. "I didn't want this, but you let it happen." Her breath caught. She didn't deny it. Jamal stared straight ahead, the cold from the metal bulkhead seeping into his back. A child nearby peered around a seat and pointed. "Why is he sitting there, Mommy?" "He got in trouble," the mother whispered. Jamal's chest tightened. The whisper still reached his ears. He didn't move, didn't blink. He was aware of everything, every word, every glance. The faint scent of citrus cleaner. The quiet beep of the intercom as the captain prepared to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain's voice rang out calm and firm. Due to a technical issue, we'll be making a precautionary landing at Lambert Field. This will not affect your connections significantly. Please remain seated as we begin our descent. The passengers groaned and murmured, but no one questioned it. Only Tori looked sick. Jamal closed his eyes. He knew what this was. There was no technical issue, no unexpected turbulence. This was the fallout of a false report, a story crafted by a woman with authority and no conscience. The once luxurious promise of the flight had been reduced to a humiliation chamber, his name becoming a silent symbol of undeserved scrutiny and carefully orchestrated shame. He could still hear the captain's voice announcing the unexpected landing and the sounds of soft grumbling from the cabin. But the quiet satisfaction in some of those murmurs was unmistakable. It wasn't just inconvenience they were reacting to. It was a shared relief that someone they viewed as out of place was being quietly removed under a blanket excuse. Jamal's phone sat in his lap, still dark, his fingers twitching with the need to connect to someone, anyone, who could affirm his reality. But he knew before even checking, the Wi-Fi login page would never appear. Still, he opened the phone and tried. The loading icon spun and then stalled. He refreshed. Nothing. Tried again. Nothing. The network settings claimed there was a connection, but no page would open, no message would send. After 5 failed attempts, a soft but pointed voice cut through the galley noise. Wi-Fi's disabled in this section, Madison said as she reached over to retrieve a metal drawer from the service cabinet. It's a safety protocol. Interference from the crew seat blocks signal access. Jamal looked up at her slowly, disbelief tingling in his chest. I've flown dozens of times. Wi-Fi works throughout the plane. She smiled, condescending and crisp. Not in this seat, it doesn't. He didn't speak, didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. But the truth landed heavily. She was lying again, deliberately isolating him from help, from witnesses, from his godmother. That was the final line she was severing. As Madison organized cups and napkins into their compartments, her tone shifted to casual, easy banter. A pair of older first-class passengers had wandered back to stretch their legs, their champagne glasses still in hand. They greeted her with a familiarity that betrayed how many times they had flown this airline. Madison welcomed them like old friends, her voice warmer than Jamal had ever heard it. Tough crowd today, she joked to them, jerking her chin discreetly toward Jamal. Had a little situation with affirmative action seating up front. Had to do some rearranging. The man laughed under his breath, and the woman rolled her eyes with a knowing smirk. Well, you handled it well, the man said. Can't have just anyone up there, right? Madison nodded, chuckling. Exactly. Some people don't understand that first class isn't about handouts. It's earned. Jamal sat completely still. He didn't flinch, didn't breathe too hard. He just stared ahead and absorbed the venom, aware that even as she mocked him inches away, there was no one coming to his defense. Not the passengers, not the pilots, not even the timid flight attendant, Tori, who had recorded the earlier incident but had since vanished into the rest of the plane. The champagne glasses clinked. The couple strolled back to their seats, satisfied, their conversation trailing off into more mundane travel talk. Madison stayed near the galley, checking her watch, then glancing down at Jamal. We should be on the ground in about 20 minutes. TSA will handle things from there. Handle what? He asked finally, voice like gravel. You already made your point. You got me out of first class. You made your jokes. What else do you need? Her expression remained unchanged, a polite facade overlaid with something crueler. Let's not escalate again, she said. I'm trying to keep this clean. You don't want things on your record before college, right? You don't know anything about me, he said. But you already decided who I am. That's your interpretation, she said. I'm just following safety protocols. Right, he said flatly. Is that what you call it when you hit someone, lie to your captain, and block Wi-Fi? She leaned in slightly, her breath faintly peppermint. Watch your tone, Mr. Harris. I'm still the one writing the report. Keep pushing, and I'll be forced to list you as uncooperative and verbally aggressive. Your college will see that. Might affect your financial aid. Schools look at character. You know. Jamal swallowed the bitterness on his tongue. The way she wielded power was surgical, perfected. It wasn't rage that drove her. It was the quiet assurance of impunity. The smug certainty that the system would shield her from consequence, while painting him as a threat. He looked back at his phone. Still no signal. Still no message sent. His godmother, Alana, would be pacing right now, checking her inbox, refreshing her texts, wondering why her godson wasn't responding. He imagined her eyes narrowing when she realized something was wrong. But she couldn't help, not yet. Not while this plane was still in the air and the flight was under the control of a woman determined to erase him. A new ding rang out overhead as the landing protocol began. Madison stepped away to make final rounds, leaving Jamal alone again with nothing but his thoughts. The harness across his chest felt tighter now, as though it had learned to mimic the silence of injustice. Jamal kept his phone on his lap, screen dark now, his thumb lightly tapping the edge, waiting for any indication of life, signal, Wi-Fi, a message, anything. But there was nothing. The silence was purposeful, choreographed. He had no illusions left. Madison had taken every tool from him. His seat, his name, his presence, his ability to speak out or defend himself. And now, from her position of confidence and protected arrogance, she had begun spinning the next phase of her narrative. While the other passengers settled in for what they believed was a standard safety diversion, a tweet quietly went live from the airline's official account. It read, "Mid-flight advisory. Due to a guest attempting unauthorized access to our premium cabin, crew initiated standard security protocols. Passenger has been safely relocated. No disruption to service." It was vague enough to avoid lawsuits, but sharp enough to imply guilt. Enough to seed the idea in the public's mind that something dangerous had happened on board. Enough to let the world imagine a belligerent stowaway, an entitled imposter trying to sneak into luxury without paying. The media in turn who posted the tweet did not know Jamal's name. They only knew that a flight report from a senior crew member marked a non-compliant young male passenger as a possible security concern. Jamal hadn't seen the tweet, but the silence around him, the strategic blocking of Wi-Fi, the tightened smiles of passing crew, the way eyes refused to meet his, told him what he needed to know. A narrative was already spreading beyond this plane, rising faster than they were descending. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the hum of the engines and the muttered conversations around the galley. But instead of silence, something else filled his mind. A memory. He was 10 years old again, small and scared, gripping his mother's hand outside a shopping mall in Atlanta. They had just left the bookstore, arms full of paperbacks and school supplies, when a mall security guard called out, "Ma'am, I need to see your bag." His mother had turned, confused but calm, and asked why. The guard didn't answer. Instead, another officer joined him, and they asked her to step to the side. Jamal remembered the way her voice changed from gentle to firm, the way she stood taller, even as they patted her down in public, right there on the pavement. He remembered crying and being told to be quiet. He remembered one officer gripping his arm too tightly when he stepped toward her. And he remembered the eyes. Dozens of eyes watching, none stepping forward. No one had helped. Later they claimed a report had been filed of someone shoplifting in that section of the mall, and that his mother fit the description. They apologized eventually, after an hour in a holding room. But Jamal never forgot it. Not the room, not the gloved hands, not the cold accusation that they wore like a badge. And now, years later, strapped to a wall in the rear of an airplane far above ground, he felt that same accusation settling onto his shoulders. Again, the pattern was repeating. Different players, same rules. He opened his eyes, jaw clenched. Torai passed by again and paused. She didn't speak, just glanced at his phone, then back to him. She looked like she wanted to say something, anything, but the words never came. She just kept moving, vanishing into the aisle, swallowed by the machine. Madison reappeared minutes later, her expression crisp and triumphant. "We're approaching descent," she said. "Please remain seated. The local authorities will speak with you briefly when we land." Jamal met her eyes, his voice flat. "You've built this whole story on nothing." "I built it on behavior," she replied. "On attitude. On precedent." "You slapped me," he said. "You blocked my Wi-Fi. You lied to the captain." "I followed protocol," she said, not blinking. "And I documented everything. You made yourself a concern. I just responded accordingly." "You mean you responded based on who you think I am," he said. "Not what I did." "That's your interpretation," she answered. The same line she had used before. The phrase was her shield, her legal defense, her way of avoiding the truth. But the mask was cracking. There was a shine in her eyes now, not quite fear, but something close. Jamal wondered for the first time if she knew she'd gone too far, if maybe Tori's recording had shaken something loose. But it didn't matter now. The descent began in full. The cabin tilted slightly as the engines reduced power. The lights dimmed and the seatbelt signs illuminated again. Passengers leaned back, finishing drinks, closing tray tables, and preparing for landing. To them, this was just another flight. But for Jamal, this was a fall. A forced descent, not just from airspace, but from dignity, from identity, from the assumption that decency would protect him. His phone buzzed briefly. For a second, hope flared in his chest. He hadn't spoken since the last exchange with Madison. There was nothing left to say. His phone vibrated in his lap. A brief buzz like the world trying to reach him again. This time he looked. The Wi-Fi had kicked back on. A text appeared. From his godmother. "Alana J. Brooks, do not speak to anyone. I'm contacting the captain. Stay seated. You did nothing wrong." Jamal's stomach flipped, not from fear, but from a sudden shift in the atmosphere. His godmother was not just a corporate attorney, as Madison had assumed and dismissed. She was Alana J. Brooks, Deputy Director of Civil Rights Enforcement with the U.S. Department of Justice. She had argued cases in federal court, sat on panels about racial profiling, and recently launched a national investigation into systemic discrimination in commercial transportation. This wasn't just a trip to reward Jamal for his grades. It had been a soft test, a quiet probe, and Madison had walked right into it. Another message came through. The DOJ is on the line with FAA command. They're pulling cockpit logs and internal comms. Do not get up until authorities arrive. I filed an emergency override. I love you. Be still. Jamal swallowed hard. The shift so sudden it felt surreal. The trap Madison had laid was about to spring in the opposite direction. Somewhere in the front cabin, a short, tense exchange happened between a junior flight attendant and the purser, both huddled over the passenger manifest. The younger one, Lisa, had taken a glance at Jamal earlier during boarding. Now, she was staring at the passenger information screen, her eyes flicking from the name Jamal Harris to a second profile that had just been uploaded, connected through emergency contact details to Alana Brooks. Her hand trembled slightly as she typed a query into the internal alert database. The name matched an internal DOJ watch list, not because Jamal was a threat, but because he was a VIP travel monitor with executive protection status. Lisa's face turned white. She stepped away from the screen, her voice barely audible as she said to the purser, "We need to stop. We need to call legal. Now." The purser didn't react immediately, still processing the chaos of a redirected landing and preparing for the presence of TSA. Madison approached, noticing the shift. "What's going on?" she asked. Lisa shook her head. "I need to speak with the captain. This is bigger than we thought." "You don't override the chain of command," Madison said, her tone sharp. "What is this about?" Lisa turned the screen toward her. "Look." Madison leaned in, her eyes scanning the text. Her confident posture faltered. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. "He's listed as a DOJ affiliate." Lisa nodded. "And his guardian?" "She's the one who filed the civil rights suit against AirTrans last year." Madison stepped back. "That can't be." He didn't say he didn't because he didn't have to, Lisa said, her voice firmer now. You provoked him. You documented him. You touched him. You relocated him. And all of it's been recorded. Madison's skin turned pale, her voice dropping. Tori's phone. Lisa didn't respond. She was already moving toward the cockpit. Madison stood frozen for a moment, gripping the edge of the galley counter as if it could hold her upright. Her carefully scripted narrative was crumbling, and the truth, real, official, federal, was flooding in fast. In the back, Jamal remained silent, though his body had relaxed slightly. Not out of comfort, but from the strength of knowing he wasn't alone anymore. He read his godmother's last text again, letting the authority in her words restore something inside him that Madison's lies had nearly stripped away. The plane taxied slowly to a stop near a remote terminal. TSA officers stood just outside the jet bridge, but not in the way Madison had imagined. They weren't waiting to detain Jamal. They were under orders to preserve the chain of custody for any recorded communication and witness testimony. The captain's door opened. He walked back down the aisle, accompanied by Lisa, who whispered something in his ear. The captain paused mid-stride, turned back toward the flight deck, and reached for the handset. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice came over the speaker again, but this time it lacked the relaxed tone of earlier. Please remain seated. A Department of Justice liaison is entering the aircraft shortly. We are cooperating fully with a federal civil inquiry. Do not disembark until instructed. A quiet wave of confusion moved through the cabin. People exchanged looks, some murmuring, others pulling out phones. Madison moved stiffly toward first class, trying to maintain composure. They had heard the captain's voice declare the presence of the Department of Justice, and now the atmosphere had transformed from irritated inconvenience to taut anxiety. Jamal remained in the rear jump seat, still strapped in, still silent. He watched the forward end of the plane with calm focus, the inner turbulence now slowly shifting into something sharper, steadier. Resolve. He hadn't moved. He hadn't spoken. And now, the moment that had been building since the first cold stare from Madison Pierce was finally arriving. The cabin door opened. 3 individuals stepped inside, flanked by a TSA supervisor who looked more nervous than commanding. At the front was a tall woman in a dark suit, her badge clipped to her waistband, her movements efficient but restrained. Behind her were 2 DOJ enforcement agents, one with a tablet already in hand, the other scanning the manifest, as if cross-referencing information live. The lead woman stepped into the center aisle. "My name is Special Investigator Dana Holt," she announced calmly. "We are conducting an immediate federal inquiry into a civil rights abuse complaint. This aircraft and its crew are temporarily under DOJ jurisdiction." The statement was met with stunned silence. Some passengers sat up straighter. A few instinctively reached for their phones. Dana continued, "We are looking for Jamal Harris, minor, age 17, listed under the custody of Alana Brooks, Deputy Director of Civil Rights Enforcement. Is he on board?" All eyes turned toward the rear. Jamal, sitting in the galley jump seat, slowly raised one hand. Dana nodded to her agents. "Confirm identity." One agent moved briskly down the aisle, tablet in hand. He stopped in front of Jamal and offered a polite nod. "Sir, can you confirm your full name?" "Jamal Everett Harris," he said, his voice calm and even. "Born June 3, 2007. Emergency contact, Alana J. Brooks." The agent tapped the tablet, then held it up to display a photo and bio entry. "Confirmed," he said. Dana nodded again. "Release him from that seat," she said to the nearby flight attendant. Tori stepped forward instinctively, fingers fumbling slightly with the harness clips. Her hands shook. Jamal glanced at her but didn't speak. When the harness fell away, he stood up slowly, his limbs stiff from the hours of forced immobility. He didn't stretch, didn't sigh, just stood there and waited. Dana turned to the cockpit. "We'll require full crew compliance," she said. "I want to speak with the flight supervisor." Madison, who had remained near the curtain of the first-class section, now approached slowly, her steps hesitant. "I'm the purser," she said, voice steady but quiet. Is there a problem? Dana's eyes narrowed slightly. There's an active complaint on this flight that a minor was discriminated against, physically assaulted, and falsely reported to federal aviation authorities under the pretense of security protocol abuse. I will need your full statement. Madison nodded. Of course. But I followed procedure. He was non-compliant. Dana raised one brow. We have conflicting reports of that. You touched a passenger physically. He resisted handing over a document, Madison said. It was a tense moment. But I didn't mean harm. We'll determine intent later, Dana replied. For now, I need all digital records, internal messages, audio logs, manifest logs, flight reports. Everything. Madison's confidence was eroding by the second, but she nodded and stepped back. Tori, standing a few feet away, suddenly spoke. I recorded what happened, she said. All heads turned. Madison's breath caught audibly. What? When you slapped his hand and accused him of forging his ticket, Tori said. I recorded it. I didn't know what else to do. Dana turned. May I see that footage? Tori nodded, pulling out her phone and tapping rapidly. She turned the screen toward Dana and one of the agents. The audio was faint but clear. Madison's voice came through with biting clarity. You want to make a scene? Go ahead. Let's see how far your story gets when they cuff you for being disruptive. Then the sharp sound of a slap. Then her cold declaration. Evidence of fraud. Dana's lips tightened. She turned to Madison. Do you deny this is your voice? Madison's mouth opened, then closed. Eye context matters. We'll get context, Dana said. From the full passenger list, from crew statements, and from your own logs. You will not leave this plane until federal debrief is complete. Passengers began whispering louder now. The old couple who had laughed with Madison earlier now looked visibly uncomfortable. The man muttered, I thought she was just trying to keep order. She slapped a kid, the woman whispered, and lied about it. Another passenger further back stood up, holding his phone. I saw her bring him to the back, he said. Didn't look like he was resisting anything. She was barking orders the whole time. Same, said a woman across the aisle. I remember thinking, why is she being so aggressive to just a kid? The murmurs grew louder, gaining traction. A few people began recording. The crowd, once quiet and compliant, was waking up. Dana stepped forward again. Just a day ago, he'd been an anonymous 17-year-old kid excited to travel in style, grateful for the surprise of a first-class ticket from his godmother. Now he was at the center of a federal civil rights inquiry, walking off a plane not as a suspect, but as a witness. Behind him, Madison remained frozen at the aircraft's front door. Her mouth was tight, jaw clenched, and every calculated step of her fabricated story now lay shattered around her. Dana Holt stood at the base of the stairs with two additional agents. She didn't look at Jamal as he approached. Instead, she spoke to her comms team through an earpiece, her voice crisp. Begin extraction of cockpit audio, full cabin logs, and all device syncs from the gate onward. Timeline priority is the jump seat relocation. Jamal was gently ushered toward a black SUV with tinted windows. Inside, an officer handed him a phone. On the other end was his godmother. You're safe now, Alana Brooks said, her voice firm but warm. We're at the DOJ field office 10 minutes from the airport. Everything's being secured. This won't happen to another kid on my watch. Jamal closed his eyes briefly. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, she replied. They did this to the wrong kid. Meanwhile, inside the aircraft, Madison was quietly instructed by Dana to step off the plane. You are not being detained, Dana clarified in front of witnesses, but effective immediately. You are suspended from duty pending federal review. You will be required to appear for deposition within 24 hours. Madison swallowed hard, her confidence finally cracking under the pressure. This is a mistake, she muttered. I was trying to follow procedure. We have the footage, Dana said, and the corroborating statements. And now we have the world watching. If I were you, I'd consider how honest you want to be moving forward. Madison said nothing more. She stepped off the plane, surrounded by silence that burned louder than any scream. A police escort took her toward a waiting vehicle. not in handcuffs, but in disgrace. Passengers began to disembark after her, but the air around them had shifted completely. The same passengers who had smirked or looked away earlier now walked with heavy expressions, avoiding each other's eyes. Several of them stopped outside the jet bridge to speak with investigators, offering their own observations, now tinged with regret. One woman, the same who had shushed her daughter earlier, was in tears. "I didn't say anything," she whispered to the DOJ agent. "I saw him get moved. I didn't know why. I thought maybe he'd done something, but I should have asked. I should have spoken up." "You're not alone," the agent said gently, "but we need to do better." Inside the terminal, everything changed in under an hour. Torai, escorted to a press safe room, sat with an agent as they extracted her full video footage and time-stamped her message logs. The clip showing Madison's slap, the accusation, and the smug declaration about evidence of fraud was uploaded to a secure DOJ server. But it didn't stay there for long. Somehow, the clip leaked, perhaps from a concerned witness, perhaps from one of the passengers who had silently recorded Madison's earlier commentary. By the time Jamal reached the DOJ field office, the clip had gone viral. It exploded on Twitter, reshared under the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack, which began trending within 20 minutes. News anchors across major outlets interrupted programming to run the story. DOJ investigating airline after teen targeted, assaulted mid-flight. Flight attendant suspended in viral civil rights abuse. Teen passengers VIP status ignored. Discriminated against at 35,000 feet. The footage was damning, unedited, crystal clear, and it sparked an immediate firestorm. The airline's CEO, blindsided, was pulled into an emergency board meeting. Legal teams drafted apology statements. The press release was issued before the full internal investigation even began. "We are deeply disturbed by the footage and treatment of Mr. Harris," it read. "The conduct displayed does not represent our values." Effective immediately, the flight crew member in question has been suspended. "We are cooperating fully with the Department of Justice and are launching a comprehensive internal review of our protocols and employee conduct training." But public sentiment didn't wait for reviews. Prominent civil rights figures weighed in within hours. Celebrities reshared the clip. College deans who'd accepted Jamal into summer programs issued statements of support. Alana Brooks was called into meetings with the Attorney General. Madison's name trended nationwide. By sundown, she was under review not only by the airline, but by the FAA, the Union Ethics Board, and 2 independent watchdog groups. Her neighbors in Denver were interviewed. A former colleague anonymously revealed she'd once made similar racially charged comments during a flight briefing. Screenshots from private crew chats began surfacing, suggesting Madison had made offhand comments about keeping things professional around diversity hires. The weight of her words and the smug tone with which she'd uttered them had finally turned back on her. She had played her power games one time too many, and this time, the person she targeted wasn't powerless. 3 weeks had passed since the video exploded across every corner of the internet, and the world had since shifted in undeniable ways. For Jamal Harris, life had moved from the cramped isolation of a crew jump seat to standing before the highest platforms of national discussion. He had spoken to media outlets, appeared on panels, and visited high schools where students asked him what it meant to keep calm when everything screamed for retaliation. But today, the room he stood in was different. The air inside the federal hearing chamber in Washington, D.C., was taut with anticipation. The Department of Justice had summoned airline industry executives, civil rights leaders, transportation regulators, and most significantly, the flight crew of Flight 439. The hearing was live-streamed across the country, carried by every major network. Rows of cameras lined the back wall. Reporters lined the hallway outside. And in the middle of it all, Jamal sat with quiet poise beside his godmother, Alana Brooks, dressed not in a suit picked for optics, but in his own carefully chosen blazer and school colors. This wasn't about theater. It was about truth. And today, the country had come to listen. The room hushed as the hearing moderator, Senator Evelyn Marks, tapped her gavel. Today, we begin with a formal review of documented discriminatory behavior and institutional accountability relating to the events aboard Flight 439. She turned slightly, her gaze falling on a woman seated farther down the long table. "Ms. Madison Pierce, please rise." All eyes shifted. Madison, noticeably paler and thinner than when she had last been seen in uniform, stood. Her posture was stiff, and her eyes flicked nervously toward the cameras. She wore no badge now, no authority, just a plain blouse, and the look of someone whose world had collapsed publicly and thoroughly. "Ms. Pierce," Senator Marks continued, "you were found in violation of federal civil conduct regulations regarding racial profiling, inappropriate physical contact with a minor, and misrepresentation of a security threat during commercial transport. Do you have anything to say before we proceed with committee findings?" The room waited. Cameras zoomed in. Microphones caught her every breath. Madison swallowed visibly, then turned toward Jamal. "I do," she said, her voice quiet but audible. "To Mr. Harris and to everyone watching, I want to apologize, not just for what I did, but for what I believed." She paused. "When I saw Jamal in that first-class seat, something in me assumed he didn't belong there, that he hadn't earned it, and I let that assumption control my actions. I treated him with suspicion. I humiliated him. I created a story in my mind that he was a problem, and I acted on it without stopping to ask if I was wrong." She looked down briefly, then back up. "I was wrong, and the consequences of that wrong will stay with me the rest of my life. I've lost my career, my community, my name. But what I did to Jamal wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal of the values I was supposed to uphold. I hope one day he can forgive me. But more importantly, I hope others like me will learn from this and see their own biases before they act on them." A quiet murmur moved through the room. Madison sat back down, her face pale but still. Senator Marks gave a small nod and then turned toward Jamal. "Mr. Harris, you may respond if you wish." Jamal stood slowly, adjusting the mic slightly as he looked around the chamber. His voice was steady, the same voice that had stayed calm at 35,000 feet, but now it carried the weight of a young man who had seen a system fail him and decided to speak up anyway. "Thank you, Senator. And thank you, Ms. Pierce, for your words." He looked around. 3 weeks ago, I was just a kid excited about a flight. I thought a ticket would guarantee me safety, that a seat assignment would guarantee respect. But I learned that systems don't protect everyone equally. Some of us have to bring proof of our humanity to even be believed. That day, I was treated like a threat not because of what I did, but because of what I looked like. My story could have ended in silence, or worse, but it didn't. He took a breath. Because people spoke up, because someone recorded the truth, because my godmother fought for my voice to be heard. And now I'm here not to punish, but to change what comes next. He turned directly to the panel. Airlines need more than policies. They need people who understand the weight of power. Flight attendants aren't just service providers. They're gatekeepers of comfort, safety, and perception. And if that gate is only open to some, then the whole sky is off limits to others. The room was still. Not even a cough broke the silence. "So I'm asking this committee not just to review what happened," he continued, "but to act. To create training that includes lived experience. To monitor patterns of profiling. To ensure no kid gets pulled out of their seat because someone else decides they look out of place." He paused one final time. "I forgive you, Ms. Pierce, but I won't forget. And I'll keep speaking until no one else has to live what I lived that day." Applause erupted, not loud and chaotic, but steady, respectful, rising in waves across the chamber. The hearing adjourned soon after, but the echoes of Jamal's speech reverberated far beyond the walls of that room. Over the next few months, legislation was introduced to create the Airline Passenger Civil Rights Oversight Board. Major airlines restructured their training. Diversity education moved from optional to mandatory. And Jamal Harris, once an anonymous teen on a flight, became the face of dignity under pressure. The living reminder that justice delayed is not justice denied when the truth is witnessed and spoken. he returned to school, graduated with honors, interned with civil rights organizations. And when asked what he remembered most from that day, he didn't talk about the slap or the seat. He talked about the silence, that heavy, suffocating quiet, and how breaking it changed everything. The end. Thanks for watching the story unfold. If you enjoyed this gripping narrative and want to see more intense, meaningful content like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep creating stories that matter. What did you think about the plot? Were you surprised by the twists? Do you think justice was served? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Join the conversation and let's talk about what's next.